The morning of my sister's wedding should have been perfect. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue dress I'd chosen for the occasion, watching as my 11-year-old daughter Emma twirled in her new pink dress behind me. Her face was radiant with excitement, her dark curls bouncing as she spun around, completely unaware that this day would become a turning point in our family's story. "Mom, do you think Aunt Melissa will like my dress?" Emma asked, smoothing down the fabric with the careful precision that had become second nature to her after years in the foster system. Even at 11, she still sought approval in ways that broke my heart, still worried about being good enough to belong. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart," I told her, meaning every word. Emma had grown so much in the 3 years since I'd adopted her. When she first came to live with me at age 8, she'd been quiet and withdrawn, carrying the weight of multiple failed placements and the deep-seated fear that she wasn't worthy of permanent love. Now, she was blossoming into a confident, caring child who lit up every room she entered. "I can't wait to meet all the cousins and take pictures with the whole family," Emma continued, her voice bubbling with anticipation. "I've never been part of a big family wedding before." That comment hit me like a punch to the gut, reminding me of all the firsts. Emma was still experiencing first stable home, first consistent school, first family traditions. It also reminded me of the conversation I'd had with my sister Melissa 2 weeks earlier, when she'd made an offhand comment about keeping the wedding photos traditional and authentic to our family heritage. At the time, I'd brushed it off as pre-wedding stress. Now, looking at Emma's hopeful face, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. My sister had never been openly hostile to Emma, but there had been subtle signs over the years: forgotten invitations to family gatherings, comments about blood relatives and real family, and a general coolness whenever Emma was around. But today was supposed to be different. Today, Emma would finally feel like she truly belonged to our extended family. At least, that's what I desperately hoped. The signs had been there from the beginning, but I'd spent 3 years making excuses for my sister's behavior. When I first told my family about my decision to adopt Emma, most of them had been supportive and excited. My parents had immediately embraced their new granddaughter, and my older brother Jake had welcomed Emma with open arms, treating her exactly the same as his biological children. But Melissa had been different. She'd smiled and said all the right things in public, but there had been an underlying tension, a sense that she viewed Emma as an outsider who was disrupting the natural order of our family. The first major incident had happened 6 months after the adoption was finalized. It was Emma's 9th birthday, and I'd planned a small family party. Everyone had been invited: parents, siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles, everyone except Melissa, who claimed she'd never received the invitation, despite my having sent it to the same email address I'd always used when I called her directly. She'd seemed genuinely surprised and apologetic, insisting that it must have gone to her spam folder. She'd shown up late to the party with a hastily wrapped gift and had spent most of the time on her phone, barely interacting with Emma or the other children. Then there was the Christmas incident. Our family had a tradition of taking a big group photo in front of my parents' fireplace every Christmas Eve. When it came time for the photo, Melissa had positioned herself in a way that partially blocked Emma from view, and when my mother suggested rearranging so everyone could be seen clearly, Melissa had made a comment about how some traditions are more important than others. The most painful incident had happened just 6 months ago, during a family reunion. Emma had been playing with her cousins when Melissa's oldest daughter, Sarah, had announced that they were going to play a game called Real Family Only. When Emma had asked what that meant, Sarah had explained, with the casual cruelty that only children possess, that it meant only kids who were really related could play. I'd been horrified and had immediately intervened, but the damage was done. Emma had spent the rest of the day quiet and withdrawn, and it had taken weeks of reassurance to convince her that she was absolutely, unquestionably, part of our family. When I'd confronted Melissa about what her daughter had said, she'd brushed it off as kids being kids and suggested that I was being overly sensitive. Each incident on its own could have been explained away as a misunderstanding or an accident, but together, they formed a pattern that I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. My sister didn't see Emma as her real niece, and she'd been subtly communicating that message for 3 years, but I'd kept hoping that time would change things, that Melissa would eventually come around and accept Emma fully. Her wedding seemed like the perfect opportunity for that to happen, a celebration of love and family that would finally bring us all together. I should have known better. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Melissa looked stunning in her flowing white gown, and her fiancé Mark seemed genuinely happy and nervous as he waited for her at the altar. Emma sat between me and my parents in the third row, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the flowers, the music, and the pageantry of it all. "It's like a fairy tale," she whispered to me as Melissa walked down the aisle. "It really is," I whispered back, squeezing her hand and feeling a surge of love for this child, who still found magic in the world despite everything she'd been through. During the ceremony, Emma was the picture of perfect behavior. She stood when everyone else stood, sat quietly during the readings, and even teared up a little during the vows. Several family members smiled at her throughout the service, and I felt a warm glow of pride watching her interact so naturally with our relatives. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, Emma charmed everyone she met. She complimented the elderly aunts on their dresses, played gently with the younger cousins, and even helped the wedding coordinator by alerting her when one of the flower arrangements started to tip over. "She's such a delightful child," my great-aunt Martha told me as we watched Emma carefully help a toddler cousin who had dropped his crackers. "You've done such a wonderful job with her, Rachel." "She's pretty amazing," I agreed, feeling that familiar surge of maternal pride. "I'm the lucky one." My brother Jake came over with his wife and kids, and I watched as Emma seamlessly joined their group, laughing at her cousin's jokes and offering to help carry their plates. This was what I'd always envisioned Emma as, a natural, accepted part of our extended family. "She fits right in," Jake's wife Linda observed. "It's like she's always been part of the family." That comment meant everything to me. Emma had worked so hard to find her place in our family, and seeing her finally relaxed and confident in this setting felt like a victory for both of us. As we moved from the cocktail hour to the reception, I felt optimistic about the rest of the evening. The ceremony had gone perfectly. Emma was having a wonderful time, and even Melissa had smiled warmly at Emma during the receiving line. Maybe I'd been wrong to worry. Maybe today really would be the day that Emma felt fully accepted by everyone in our family. The reception was in full swing when the wedding photographer announced it was time for family photos. Emma's face lit up with excitement as she heard the announcement. She'd been looking forward to this moment all day, the chance to be included in the official family portraits, to have permanent proof that she belonged with us. "Come on, Ma," she said, tugging on my hand. "Let's go take pictures with everyone." We made our way over to where the photographer was setting up near the head table. The wedding coordinator, a efficient-looking woman in her 40s with a clipboard and a headset, was organizing family members into groups for different shots. "Okay, let's start with immediate family only," the photographer called out. "Parents, siblings, and their children, please." Emma stepped forward confidently with me, but the wedding coordinator immediately put out her hand to stop her. "Excuse me, sweetie," the woman said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This session is invitation only. I don't see you on my list for the immediate family photos." Emma stopped short, confusion washing over her face. "But I am family," she said quietly. "I'm Rachel's daughter." The coordinator glanced down at her clipboard, then looked at me with a slightly apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, but I have very specific instructions about who should be included in each shot. This particular grouping is for blood relatives only." The words hit me like a physical blow. Blood relatives only. I looked around and saw my parents, my brother Jake with his wife and kids, and Melissa with Mark. Everyone was staring at us, and I could see the confusion and discomfort on their faces. "There must be some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as my heart was racing with anger. "Emma is my daughter. She should absolutely be in the family photos." The coordinator looked uncomfortable, but held firm. "I understand, but these are the bride's specific instructions. Perhaps she can be included in some of the later, more casual shots." I looked over at Melissa, who was adjusting her veil and avoiding eye contact. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a mistake or a miscommunication. Melissa had deliberately instructed the photographer to exclude Emma from the official family photos. Emma's face had gone pale, and I could see her trying not to cry. She'd been through this before. The subtle and not so subtle messages that she didn't quite belong, that she was somehow less than the other children in our family. But this was different. This was public, deliberate, and cruel. "Emma, honey, why don't you go sit with Grandma and Grandpa for a minute while I sort this out?" I said, trying to buy myself time to figure out how to handle this situation. But Emma shook her head, her chin trembling. "It's okay, Mom. I understand. I'll just wait over there. Watching my 11-year-old daughter walk away with as much dignity as she could muster, trying to pretend that being excluded from her own family's photos didn't hurt, was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life. I waited until the immediate family photos were finished before confronting my sister. She was touching up her lipstick in a small mirror when I approached her, my anger barely contained. "Melissa, we need to talk now." She looked up with a bright smile that faltered when she saw my expression. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay. Why is Emma not included in the family photos?" Melissa's smile disappeared entirely, and for a moment, I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Rachel, please don't make a scene. This is my wedding day." "I'm not making a scene. I'm asking you why my daughter, your niece, is being excluded from family photos." Melissa sighed and set down her mirror. "Look, I know you love Emma, and she's a sweet kid, but these photos are going to be in our family album forever. They're going to be passed down to our children and grandchildren. I wanted them to be ... authentic. Authentic," I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means actual family, Rachel. Blood family. I know that sounds harsh, but Emma isn't really our family, is she? She's your daughter, and I respect that, but she's not a blood relative. These photos are about our family heritage, our genealogy." I stared at my sister in disbelief. "Emma has been my daughter for 3 years. She's legally adopted. She's as much a part of this family as anyone else here." "Legally, yes, but not really. And I think when she's older, she'll understand. I'm not trying to be mean, Rachel. I'm just trying to preserve our family's authentic history." The casual cruelty of her words, the way she dismissed Emma's place in our family as somehow temporary or fake, made me see red. This wasn't about family heritage or genealogy. This was about prejudice, pure and simple. "You know what, Melissa? You're right about one thing. This is your wedding day, and these photos will be in your family album forever. But Emma is my family, and if she's not welcome in your photos, then neither am I." I turned to walk away, but Melissa grabbed my arm. "Rachel, don't be ridiculous. You're being way too sensitive about this. It's just photos." "It's not just photos, and you know it. It's 3 years of subtle exclusions and it's teaching a child who's already been abandoned multiple times that she doesn't really belong anywhere. It's cruel, Melissa, and I'm done pretending it's not." I looked across the reception hall and saw Emma sitting alone at our table, watching the other children play while she tried to look like she didn't care that she'd been left out. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. The DJ had just announced that it was time for toasts, and the best man was making his way to the microphone. I watched as he delivered a funny, heartfelt speech about Mark and their friendship, and then as Melissa's maid of honor spoke about their college years and how happy she was to see Melissa find true love. Then the DJ announced that the bride's family would like to say a few words. My father stood up first, delivering a touching speech about watching Melissa grow up and how proud he was of the woman she'd become. My brother Jake followed with some embarrassing childhood stories that had everyone laughing. Then the microphone was passed to me. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding as I looked out at the room full of family and friends. Emma was watching me from our table, her eyes still red from trying not to cry earlier. Melissa was beaming at the head table, probably expecting a traditional sister of a bride speech about love and happiness and family bonds. I walked to the microphone and adjusted it to my height, taking a deep breath as the room fell quiet. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel, Melissa's older sister." There was a smattering of applause, and I saw Melissa nod encouragingly. "I've been thinking a lot today about what it means to be family," I continued, my voice growing stronger as I found my rhythm, "about the bonds that tie us together and the love that makes us who we are." I paused and looked directly at Emma, who was watching me with wide, curious eyes. 3 years ago, I became a mother to the most incredible little girl. Emma came to me through adoption, after spending years in foster care, moving from home to home, never quite finding where she belonged. I could see some confusion in the audience now, people wondering where this speech was going. Melissa's smile was becoming more forced. "Emma taught me that family isn't about DNA or bloodlines. It's about choice. It's about showing up for each other, supporting each other, and loving each other unconditionally. It's about making sure that everyone feels valued and included and cherished." My voice was getting stronger now, and I could see people in the audience nodding along. Today, I watched my daughter's face light up with joy at the idea of being part of a big family celebration. I watched her help with the younger children, compliment the elderly relatives, and conduct herself with grace and kindness that would make any parent proud. I looked directly at Melissa now, whose face had gone pale. But I also watched as she was told that she couldn't be included in the family photos because she wasn't really family. I watched as an 11-year-old child was made to feel like an outsider at what should have been a celebration of love and inclusion. The room had gone completely silent now. I could see shock and confusion on many faces, and growing anger on others as they realized what I was describing. So I want to take this moment to say something that should have been said a long time ago. Emma is my daughter. She is our family. She belongs here just as much as anyone else in this room, and anyone who can't see that, anyone who would deliberately exclude a child to preserve some notion of authentic family, is missing the entire point of what family is supposed to be about. The silence that followed my speech was deafening. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed to breathe. Then, slowly, my father stood up and began to clap. My mother joined him, then Jake and his family, then my great-aunt Martha, and soon the entire room was erupting in applause. I looked over at Emma, who had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling the biggest smile I'd ever seen. She stood up and ran to me, and I scooped her up in my arms as the applause continued around us. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you for standing up for me." "Always, baby," I whispered back. "Always," but not everyone was applauding. Melissa sat frozen at the head table, her face a mixture of shock, anger, and humiliation. Mark, her new husband, was looking between his wife and me with obvious confusion and growing concern. As the applause died down, people began approaching us. My cousin David, whom I hadn't seen in years, came over with his wife and kids. "Rachel, that was incredibly brave," he said, shaking my hand. "And Emma, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You are absolutely part of this family." His 10-year-old daughter tugged on Emma's dress. "Do you want to come play with us? We're going to get some cake." Emma looked up at me for permission, and I nodded. As she ran off with her cousins, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my father. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "That took courage, and it was the right thing to do." "I should have done it sooner," I replied. "I should have stopped making excuses for her behavior years ago." My mother joined us, her face troubled. I had no idea Melissa felt that way about Emma. I'm ashamed that we didn't notice what was happening. More family members approached throughout the evening, many of them apologizing for not speaking up earlier, others sharing their own shock at what had happened. It became clear that most of our family had no idea about Melissa's attitude toward Emma, and they were genuinely horrified by what they'd learned. But there was also a divide forming. Some of Melissa's friends and a few family members seemed to think I'd been inappropriate, that I'd ruined her special day by airing family drama in public. I overheard one of her college friends saying that I was jealous and attention-seeking. I didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, Emma was surrounded by family members who were actively including her, making sure she felt welcome and valued. She spent the rest of the evening dancing with her cousins, taking silly photos with my parents, and basking in the attention of relatives who were making up for lost time. The real confrontation came later, after most of the guests had left and the family was helping to clean up. Melissa cornered me near the gift table, her wedding dress now wrinkled and her makeup smudged from what had clearly been a difficult evening. "How could you do that to me?" she hissed, her voice shaking with anger. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone on my wedding day?" "I didn't humiliate you, Melissa. Your own actions did that." "My actions? I was trying to preserve our family's integrity. I was trying to maintain some sense of tradition and authenticity. You were trying to exclude a child because she doesn't share your DNA. That's not tradition, Melissa. That's prejudice." Mark appeared beside his new wife, his face grim. "Melissa, is what Rachel said true? Did you deliberately exclude Emma from the family photos?" Melissa's face flushed. "Mark, you don't understand. It's complicated. Emma is adopted, and I thought, you thought, what?" Mark interrupted, his voice getting louder. "That she's somehow less of a family member because she's adopted. That she doesn't deserve to be treated with the same respect as the other children. It's not about respect. It's about accuracy. Those photos are going to represent our family for generations, and Emma is part of this family," Mark said firmly. "She's been part of this family for 3 years. What you did today was cruel and unacceptable." I watched as my sister's new husband, a man I'd barely gotten to know, stood up for my daughter in a way that Melissa never had. It was both heartening and heartbreaking. Mark, please, Melissa said, her voice becoming desperate. You're taking this all wrong. I love Emma. I do. I just think there should be some distinction between biological family and what? Mark cut her off. Adopted family, chosen family. Melissa, I can't believe you're saying this. I can't believe you would hurt a child this way. Tears were streaming down Melissa's face now, but I couldn't tell if they were from remorse or frustration at not being understood. This is my wedding day, she said again, as if that somehow justified everything. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you've ruined it. No, Melissa, I said quietly, you ruined it. You ruined it the moment you decided that your prejudice was more important than a child's feelings. You ruined it when you chose exclusion over love. The weeks following the wedding were difficult for our entire family. The story of what had happened spread quickly through our extended family network, and people were forced to take sides. Most of our relatives supported Emma and me, expressing shock and disappointment at Melissa's behavior, but a few, particularly some of the older, more traditional family members, seemed to think that I had overreacted. My parents were caught in the middle, trying to maintain relationships with both of their daughters, while also processing their own feelings about what had happened. My mother called me a few days after the wedding, her voice heavy with sadness. I keep thinking about all the times Melissa excluded Emma, and I feel terrible that we didn't notice, she said. We should have been more aware, more protective. It wasn't your responsibility, Mom. It was mine, and I should have addressed it sooner. How is Emma handling all of this? I looked over at my daughter, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, seemingly unaffected by the family drama swirling around her. She's actually doing really well. I think finally having it all out in the open, having people acknowledge what was happening and stand up for her, has been healing in a way. And it was true. In the days following the wedding, Emma had received calls and visits from family members who wanted to make sure she knew she was loved and valued. My cousin David had invited her to his daughter's birthday party. My great aunt Martha had sent her a card with a photo from the wedding reception, showing Emma laughing with her cousins. Even some of Melissa's friends had reached out to apologize for not speaking up sooner. Emma was experiencing, perhaps for the first time, what it felt like to have a large extended family that truly accepted and celebrated her. It was beautiful to watch, but it also highlighted how much she'd been missing before. The hardest part was explaining to Emma why her aunt had treated her the way she had. At 11, she was old enough to understand the basic concept of prejudice, but it was still difficult for her to comprehend why someone would dislike her for something she couldn't control. Mom, do you think Aunt Melissa will ever like me? She asked one evening, as I was tucking her into bed. I think Aunt Melissa has some things she needs to work through, I said carefully. Her feelings about you aren't really about you at all. They're about her own fears and prejudices. But that doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. I know, Emma said quietly. I just wish she could see that I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I just want to belong. That comment broke my heart all over again. Even after everything that had happened, Emma was still trying to understand and forgive, still hoping for acceptance from someone who had repeatedly rejected her. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected phone call from Mark, Melissa's new husband. His voice was tense and tired when I answered. Rachel, I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. There are some things I need to discuss with you about Melissa and Emma. We met at a small cafe near my office the next day. Mark looked like he hadn't been sleeping well, and there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there on his wedding day. I need you to know that I had no idea about Melissa's feelings toward Emma before the wedding, he began without preamble. If I had known what she was planning, I would have stopped it immediately. I believe you, I said. Your reaction that night made that pretty clear. Mark ran his hands through his hair. The thing is, it's not just about the wedding photos. Since then, I've been learning about other incidents, other times when Melissa excluded Emma or made comments about her not being real family. I'm horrified, Rachel. I'm horrified that the woman I married could be so cruel to a child. I felt a mixture of validation and sadness. Validation that someone else could see the pattern of behavior I'd been dealing with for years, and sadness that it was causing problems in Melissa's marriage. What are you going to do? I asked. I've insisted that we go to counseling, both couples counseling and individual therapy for Melissa. She needs to understand that her behavior is unacceptable and that it has to change if our marriage is going to work. Mark paused and looked directly at me. I also want you to know that Emma will always be welcome in my home. Regardless of what happens between Melissa and me, I consider Emma to be my niece, and I will treat her as such. That offer meant more to me than Mark could possibly know. It was a reminder that family can be chosen, that love and acceptance can come from unexpected places. Has Melissa agreed to counseling? I asked. Mark's expression darkened. Eventually, but not without a lot of resistance. She keeps insisting that she's not the problem, that you and Emma are being overly sensitive. She seems to genuinely believe that her behavior was justified. We talked for another hour, with Mark asking questions about Emma's history and trying to understand the impact of Melissa's actions. By the end of our conversation, I had a new respect for this man who was willing to challenge his wife's prejudices and stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. I hope Melissa can work through this, I told him as we prepared to leave. For her sake as much as anyone's. Carrying that kind of prejudice and hatred is toxic. It's poisoning her relationships and preventing her from experiencing the joy of truly knowing Emma. Mark nodded sadly. I hope so too. But I want you to know that regardless of what happens, I'll always be an advocate for Emma. She deserves better than what she's gotten from this family. The breakthrough came 2 months after the wedding, in the form of an unexpected visit from Melissa. I was surprised to find her standing on my doorstep on a Saturday afternoon, looking nervous and uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I invited her in, calling upstairs to let Emma know that Aunt Melissa was here. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, her face cautious but not hostile. Hi, Aunt Melissa, she said politely. Hi, Emma, Melissa replied, her voice thick with emotion. You look really good. Emma came downstairs and sat on the couch across from Melissa, her posture alert but relaxed. I sat beside my daughter, ready to intervene if necessary. I've been going to therapy, Melissa began, her hands twisting in her lap. Individual therapy and couples therapy with Mark. And I've been learning some things about myself that are difficult to face. She looked directly at Emma. I owe you an apology, Emma, a big one. The way I've treated you over the past 3 years has been wrong and hurtful, and I'm so sorry. Emma listened quietly, her face serious but open. I was scared, Melissa continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I was scared that if I accepted you as part of our family, it would somehow change what our family meant. I was scared that traditions would be lost or that things would be different. But I realize now that those fears were stupid and selfish and cruel. She paused, wiping her eyes. The therapist helped me understand that I was threatened by you, Emma, not because of anything you did, but because you represented change, and I don't handle change well. I thought that if I could keep you at arm's length, I could preserve some imaginary version of our family that existed only in my head. Emma spoke for the first time. Why didn't you just try to get to know me? The simple question seemed to hit Melissa like a physical blow, because I was afraid that if I got to know you, I would love you. And if I loved you, I would have to admit that I was wrong about what family means. And now, I asked quietly. Melissa looked at both of us, her face raw with emotion. Now I realize that I've missed out on 3 years of knowing an incredible kid. I've missed birthdays and school plays and soccer games and bedtime stories. I've missed the chance to be a real aunt to you, Emma, and I can't get that time back. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing what she'd heard. Finally, she spoke. I forgive you, Aunt Melissa, but I need you to promise that you'll never exclude me like that again. It really hurt, and it made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere. Melissa nodded emphatically. I promise, Emma. I promise that I will never exclude you again, and I promise that I will work every day to be the aunt you deserve. It wasn't a magic fix. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But it was a beginning, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt hopeful that Emma might finally have the full acceptance from our family that she'd always deserved. 6 months later, we gathered for another family celebration, Emma's 12th birthday party. This time, there was no question about who belonged in the family photos. Melissa was the one suggesting different groupings and making sure Emma was prominently featured in every shot. Okay, now let's get one with just the birthday girl and all her aunts and uncles, Melissa called out, pulling Emma close to her side. I watched as Emma beamed in the center of the group, surrounded by family members who were all genuinely happy to be there celebrating her. The contrast with that awful day at the wedding was stark and beautiful. Later, as we were cleaning up after the party, Melissa approached me in the kitchen. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me. For giving me the chance to make this right. I know I didn't deserve it after what I did. I looked at my sister, seeing not the cold, prejudiced woman who had excluded my daughter, but the scared, flawed person who had been willing to do the hard work of changing. We're family, Melissa, real family. That means we don't give up on each other, even when we mess up badly. She smiled through her tears. Emma is lucky to have you as her mom. I'm the lucky one, I replied, watching through the window as Emma played in the backyard with her cousins, all of them laughing and running around together like the family they'd always been meant to be. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still moments of awkwardness, as we all learned new patterns of relating to each other. But Emma now had what she'd always wanted, a large, loving, extended family that truly accepted her as one of their own. The wedding photos from Melissa's big day still existed, of course. The official family photos that had excluded Emma were tucked away in an album somewhere, a permanent reminder of a painful chapter in our family's story, but they'd been overshadowed by hundreds of other photos, birthday parties, holidays, casual family gatherings, where Emma was front and center, smiling and laughing and belonging. Sometimes I thought about that moment at the microphone, when I'd made the decision to speak up publicly about what was happening. It had been scary and uncomfortable, and it had caused a lot of family drama, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes love requires courage. Sometimes protecting the people we care about means being willing to make others uncomfortable. Emma had learned that day that she had someone who would always stand up for her, someone who would never let her be excluded or diminished. But more than that, she'd learned that she was worth standing up for, that her place in our family was non-negotiable. As I tucked her into bed that night after her birthday party, she looked up at me with those wise eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Mom, do you think other kids who are adopted have families like ours? What do you mean, sweetheart? Families that fight for them, families that make sure they belong. I thought about her question carefully. I hope so, Emma. I hope every adopted child has people who will stand up for them and make sure they know they're loved and valued, but I know that's not always the case. She was quiet for a moment. I'm really lucky, aren't I? We're all lucky, baby. We're lucky to have each other. As I turned off her light and headed downstairs, I reflected on how much our family had grown and changed since that awful day at the wedding. We'd been forced to confront some ugly truths about prejudice and exclusion, but we'd also discovered the power of love and acceptance to heal even the deepest wounds. Emma was no longer the scared, uncertain child who worried about whether she really belonged. She was confident and secure in her place in our family, surrounded by people who celebrated her for exactly who she was. And that, more than any wedding photo or family tradition, was what real family looked like.